Think about, what I can do best. It's about these enormous problems, business problems that are very enormous, exciting, real world problems where I can apply technology, right? The problem is what excites me. Look at it through that lens. There's nothing greater than supply chain logistics and world of commerce and, how you make these things tick. This logistics is very real, very complex. And it is may not sexy, but it needs to be solved.
All right, Rathna, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged. Thanks for joining me.
Jeff, great to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's start from the top. Tell me about FlavorCloud.
So, FlavorCloud is a cross border logistics enablement platform. So, we make international shipping easy, affordable, and friction free for shippers. They could be brands, retailers, or third party logistics providers.
And then how did this come about? Like why FlavorCloud and like what was your background or what opportunity did you see in the market?
It's a really interesting story that goes back 28 years. Stumbled upon transportation, supply chain, and logistics. To work, I started as a developer and then led product organizations. Around 10 years in the supply chain logistics space. So, primarily working with carriers, forwarders, 3PLs, building optimization and cross-border solutions around the world, so North America, Asia, and Europe. So think all modes of transportation. I worked with customs organizations around the world, defining trade, tariff, regulatory compliance, and what that should look like. It was 10 years of my life in Portland, Oregon. Then I moved to Seattle, and rather than take on transportation, I wanted a whole new space, something I was very excited about e-commerce, so joined a tiny startup team within Microsoft. We were a dozen, the founding team that built the ad platform that eventually became Bing Ads, and we scaled to about 3 billion when I left. It was marketplace monetization ad platforms and got to work with the Amazons and eBays of the world all the way down to SMBs. What's fascinating was we were helping make the connection between brand and consumer through ads.
Right.
That was incredible experience. But what it got me thinking about was as I was traveling around the world, the way I discover is actually is through brands and products, and I shop a lot. And as a consumer, experience was so horrendous that it got me thinking about why my past life didn't translate to a great B2C consumer future that we were powering at Microsoft. And I could see that become huge and connected commerce becoming norm.
Right.
Felt like, and the logistics is a massively manual, enormous industry, but so fragmented and ripe for innovation and technology that can actually scale. So I wanted to bring all of these together. So e-commerce, technology, and logistics enablement. So I quit Microsoft along with my co-founder, who used to be my developer at Bing Ads, and started my first company. It was a marketplace that enables small and medium brands to sell internationally. We found two things from there. One, that there was no solution to enable anywhere to anywhere marketplace. So we built the back end ground up after using all these slivers of solutions. And then we thought SMB was the real problem, but we started getting requests from larger brands. They had more of a need. So that led to the creation of FlavorCloud as API services that really solve core cross-border, which is shipping, customs, compliance. So it's a long-winded way of saying it's a journey, but I think what's really exciting is it took me back to logistics and transportation full circle.
That's so funny. I think so often it's hard to know what we're doing and why we're doing it in the present until you look back. And oftentimes you see, wow, this was an obvious journey up to this point, but sometimes it's not as easy to see that. Why did you guys come up with FlavorCloud? Like, what was behind the name? Yeah.
Looking for companies that did shipping and global enablement, customs, logistics. There were dime a dozen companies that were ship something, or global something. So the complexity of international is such that we're not just doing shipping, it's not just compliance, it's not just trade, it's the diversity of things that you need to enable to make that transaction really seamless. We wanted to describe that diversity in the flavors of commerce, if you will, so that's where it came from. But it also is a diversity in terms of geography. Like, we needed to be great at 220 plus countries day one, because we're doing customs compliance clearance. It's not one of those traditional product development cycles where you start with one country and say, hey, we're going to do US and then we'll think about expanding to the next country. It literally was, if you're going to do international, you need to be great at all these other countries that are actually death by a thousand cuts.
So you talk about the complexities. I mean, I think you chose one of the most complex industries, maybe. There's a lot of complexities when you're talking about cross-border logistics. What were some of the biggest, like, operational or regulatory hurdles, and how did you get around those?
I think the thing about regulatory compliance is that it's never ending. I don't think we're ever done. Product, we always like to say it's day one and you're continuously evolving, which is very true. Supply chain logistics, especially because there's a massive pace of change.
Right.
Adoption of e-commerce, B2B, there's a lot of different trade winds. They're constantly shifting, and it's not that if one lane closes, then there's other places that it moves to. It's constant, the growth. And if you look at the growth in different parts of the world, it's like India is one of the fastest growing markets in terms of e-commerce, 2x that of like the US.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunity in different parts of the world. So being anywhere to anywhere, being that global platform, means that you're continuously adapting, and regulatory changes go hand in hand. So it's just a matter of when that change is going to come about. And that's also why we exist, right? It's so complex, it's so fluid, it's so dynamic, and you need systems that can adapt to that real time. And so that takes a lot of what we do, we specialize in, but also it means that you need to be ready when it happens. It's just a matter of time.
The biggest challenges are usually the biggest opportunities. It just takes someone and a team to focus around those. You had mentioned your background, and I know your background a little bit, but it was, you were a developer, you're a program manager, you're a product manager. Did you ever think you would be an entrepreneur?
Did not. I'm not one of those entrepreneurs. They always knew they were going to go build something and they wanted to work for themselves. I wasn't that person. I think trade that I had of starting in logistics and doing all of these things. If I think about what is the thread that really connects my choices, or about for me is I'm always, if I get too comfortable, then I need to move. I need to be, embrace being uncomfortable, really continuous learning, as I like to call it.
Right.
Blueprint is a good place to be, at least for me right now. And so I'm constantly looking at that. So if it is the same, then I look for the next challenge. So I think entrepreneurship is one of those really fascinating things because every day there's a ton of stuff that you know nothing about, and you're constantly at
Right.
changes as from early days to as you grow, the company grows, the challenges are different. That's very exciting as well. So I think it's more of I chanced upon it because of the challenge. The second thing I think is, what I think about, what I can do best. It's about these enormous problems, business problems that are very enormous, exciting, real world problems where I can apply technology, right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
brings me. The problem is what excites me. So look at it through that lens, there's nothing greater than supply chain logistics and world of commerce and how you make these things tick. Um, this logistics is very real, uh, very complex, and it is may not sexy, but it needs to be solved. Um,
Right.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a couple of the things that you said are like core to a lot of founders is that need to constantly be learning. And if you feel like you're not learning, is you have to change something or put yourself in the position. And I think that one of the things that you said, I talk about a lot is it's you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you're if you're comfortable being uncomfortable, that's kind of what propels people ahead and gets people moving. And then the last thing that you said is so true. It's solving big problems and the opportunity of like leveraging technology to solve these problems is a great opportunity right now. So I think it makes so much sense that you're being an entrepreneur and you've been able to grow the organization quite far. Like, what was the biggest thing that you focused on going from about a dozen employees to where you're at now?
So I think it was right around our Series A where we were about 10 people. So it was all product and engineering, one sales, one customer success, and it was a vastly different organization, all inbounds. That shift to the next, I think, 25 was a big shift. We're a little over 50 now, so it's been a couple big shifts, if you will.
Right.
But those has been very different learning experiences because I think the people you need for the 0 to 1 are quite different.
Right.
And that you go from 1 to 10, 10 to 25, 50 is a very different type of you know person, and it's a very different organization, it's a different skill set. It's also been a different ICP. Like, we've been a different company almost every single year, and it's been really
Mm,
the last 7 years. That's what's really fascinating, and we talked about growth, and there is nothing like that. You people that scale that are really great at even know I had it or they had it. It's something that you learn over time that, certain people have the ability to do that. And at other times it is, they're great at that one thing. And so you need to find a specialist.
yeah, it comes back to learning. Like the people that are very hungry to learn and have the ability to do that tend to stay with the organization as it grows. But I think even from day one, it's the scientific process of learning what works, what doesn't work, doubling down on what is working, try to figure out a different solution for the things that don't work. And as you scale, it becomes more complex because at first it's one team and then it becomes team of teams and then team of teams of teams, and making sure that every team is focused, every team is in alignment, every team is learning and communicating those learnings to everybody else. It makes sense to say, like, you see the company as it was a different company every year. That makes so much sense.
Absolutely. You're spot on.
What are those things that you had early on you had an assumption on in the business, and as you got further down the road it was maybe the opposite of what you thought?
No, that I would say that it was the opposite. I think it was more anywhere to anywhere was a vision day one. Like, that was the big bold vision. I think look at it as corroboration of that vision over time and how we got there. Obviously there were many things where we learned we should have done it differently. We should have gone after for example, chose a channel strategy for scaling. It's a great model where we're enabling these massive shippers. Now, in hindsight, would I have done that earlier? Signs that we should have. Absolutely, we should have. But I think it's more about realizing that through data and through actual doing, as opposed to just going based off of we should have done that. So I don't know that anything was drastically different.
Yeah, sometimes getting there and doing it is the only way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, the thing is, the markets change, the dynamics of each country changes. Had always envisioned being the one-stop shop for all things international. And it's been very exciting to see that come to fruition in different ways. Like, for example, we now enable B2B. We're the first to automate B2B, which is actually 10 years behind B2C e-commerce. We saw it, but now it's really the COVID era has kind of ushered that in, growth that we could not have imagined.
Your team is as remote as your customers, right?
Yes.
How do you keep that alignment and focus and accountability with the team in that environment?
That's pre-COVID. We were, a Seattle-based company, well, obviously very small. The decision going remote to, start hiring people, great talent wherever they are, because we were doing all the deals, we were closing remotely and selling, and everything was. I think my raise was done online. So, given all of that, our team is now in multiple countries. We're in US, Canada, India. To have someone in UAE. It really is truly a remote team. Even within the US, we're in 15 states. It certainly is not there's no density anywhere really. It is a challenge. I often talk to other founders and what they're doing. We're always trying to share and learn. I think the early stages, the culture aspect has been the biggest learning. I think it's so in a remote environment to communicate, to have alignment often and repeat often, and make sure that create environment where sharing is really easy. All of those things have helped. Certainly had our challenges. We don't meet as often. We meet more so during events. I get to see team members
Mm,
those events, do better on offsites. So there's a few things that we want to do better, but I think everyone's learning. I don't know that anyone has cracked this. We're trying to adopt things that work for us and that truly see the value in a remote team. Like us to be a remote company. And I think a lot of the policies, and we have a lot of tools and technology that we've embraced to make it easier. And
right.
it has certainly helped a lot more than you would if you could walk down to your desk and talk to somebody. It's a very different miss whiteboarding. Absolutely. It's to have these discussions. Board meetings are remote, right? So all of it, we've adapted. I think we have a better strategy, but I think it's so important that we embrace this and find a way, because customers are in every part of the world. We are a global company. We enable not just US outbound, but APAC and EMEA and all of these countries around the world. So I do expect our team will scale around the world to be wherever our customers are at as well.
I think that makes a lot of sense. We work with a lot of teams that are remote. We have teams that are, all in one office. I really can't say that I know one of the teams out of the hundreds that we work with that has everybody in one office. I just don't think that's a reality. And I know there's a lot of talk of bringing people back to the office, but in order to get the right talent, I think it makes so much sense to cast a larger net. You can find so many more people if you cast a larger net and really find the people that want the role, they understand the role, they want to be a part of this company and the culture. And I just think it's such a great idea. Some of the low hanging fruit, I think, with the teams that we work with is creating a cadence around communication and learning, which is like doing an annual session with the team, each team doing their own annual sessions, having a quarterly session where we can review the things that are working and not working, and then also set up the next 90 days based on the, a 1 year plan or 3 year vision. But having those cadences built in kind of create those habits. And even I think the companies, yes,
Every month, it's been a really good alignment. It forces us to get better at planning so that to communicate better to the board, to the team, to how are we doing against plans, and what, if anything, is different. What should you think about for next year's strategy, for example, is top of mind for me right now, because dissemination of that, again, often and early and as option is something we want. Yeah, as leaders, I think it forces us to be at some of these things which you would take for granted if you were in an office environment. But I'll also say that my team, especially we've attracted, are the ones that want the flexibility, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's important to a lot of people. They have they can manage their lives around whatever going on. Still schedule time for work when it's right for them.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And those having that flexibility and having your life and work together in one is so important. And you'll attract those people. The all hands I think is great. We like to cadence do like the offsite with the leadership team. They work with their teams prior to the offsite, and they go back to their teams with that, and then we do the all hands, and then we do the board meeting. Sometimes teams will do the offsite board meeting, then all hands, but that's kind of the cadence a lot of our teams use, and keeping that cadence just works so well because now you're bringing the information together, but then distributing in it, getting feedback and doing it again. And I think it's that iteration. You're never going to nail anything the first time around, and it's dialing it in.
Same as development, you're just continuously learning and tweaking. But yeah.
I always want to use the agile term, but I know a lot of people get confused and think software. But I mean, that's really it's that iterative process. Back in the day, you'd think business plans were kind of a waterfall process, like gather all the information, write this business plan, and then you just execute it over the years. But that's just not the reality anymore. And an operating system to me is a living, breathing business plan. Now, you've done a lot of fundraising. And it sounds like maybe during COVID, you were doing your fundraising online too. Like, what were some of the lessons learned fundraising?
I think it was more efficient, I'd say, because it forces you to be organized. I learned how to run a process, and it was actually pretty efficient. I had a 2-week process, and the third week reviewed terms, and I've done that twice now, and it's worked. So I think it's better than traveling. Certainly Seattle doesn't have the community, so that meant and if it wasn't for COVID and remote, I would have had to travel to San Francisco and New York and wherever else, and I got done with just meetings, a week of meetings for the first meetings, and it was a better process.
Well, I think the word process makes so much sense. I think oftentimes I talk to founders about fundraising, and the ones that struggle did not have a process. Everything's a process, even if you start with what you think the process is and you iterate along the way. But like, I think that can be really challenging for people if they don't think of it in a process. And a 2-week turnaround, that seems really fast.
So I actually learned from other founders who had good processes, and I think important to kind of timelines for yourself. Otherwise, it can be never ending. And I usually want to get back to business.
And those timelines can change, but I think setting something up front is really important. Otherwise, it will just go on and on and on.
I hear 3 months, 6 months for like a process. I'm just like, okay, I don't have that kind of time.
Right.
It needs to be point, or you call it done.
Now you talk a lot of founders, and I'm sure via the your network and via the investors that you have, you're probably part of a bunch of Slack groups with founders. What's one thing that you don't think people are talking enough about, like being a founder?
I think it's really lonely place to be. And remote, it's even lonelier, I would say. Having that community is really nice. I always look up to the founders that are 2 steps ahead of me. What did you do? I don't want to learn it the hard way. Can I learn
Right.
it from your? And they're usually great and generous with the time, and you try to do the same for the next set of founders. And learnings are important. Some of them relevant. It was to be more immediate, their experiences, because few years ago, it doesn't really matter because the ecosystem is so different, and the current environment in the post-COVID era is quite different. I always look to founders that are a few steps ahead.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And what would you tell founders that are maybe in that seed stage or Series A stage, now that you kind of traverse that landscape? What would you tell them?
I mean, they're in environment right now is very different for seed than it was, I think, when I started. Really, it is about early stages. It's more about, founder market fit, or it's like getting to product market fit and revenue. So really focusing on the metrics and really being to tell the story is usually the guidance that I give. Outside of that, it is about being brave, out just jumping in and doing it. The only way you figure it out is by actually doing it. I have viewed companies from 50 to 100. What are the important things for that company to focus on, like people, and then
Right.
getting to, let's say, million revenue.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because part of my answer on this is always the same. And I believe that early stage companies versus growth stage companies or companies at any scale, it's typically the same problems, just more zeros. Right. So I think it's oftentimes the same problems, but more zeros, or same opportunities, but more zeros. That said, though, I do believe what you saw probably, getting to where you're at now is it becomes more of a team of teams. And so being really clear about communicating and absorbing what that alignment is, where we're going, to really define what that is, and more inputs to pull that together from each of the teams as it comes up to the leadership team, starting from, top down, but also bottoms up is so important. And then defining like what we need to do and how we need to do it and who's going to do it. It's more of a scaling. So I think you have to take more of a dedicated process and time to do that right. And it's so important. It's a lot of times people will do planning, but they skip absorbing first, like what's working, what's not working, where are we struggling, and flipping those things that don't work into opportunities, right? And so I think it's that combined with doing proper planning, and not high level planning, but getting under the surface of what we actually need to do to achieve those things. I think the companies that go from 50 to 100 employees or 200 employees, they're not doing that at a surface level. They're getting deep and using a process that works, and it's a system that I think typically is a closed loop system, so everything's kind of tied to itself. And the time spent on that, I think those companies that figure that out tend to work really well. One of our mutual acquaintances that we both know, Jet over at Project 44, watched him scale Project 44 from the early stage to where it's at now. And it was all about kind of hardening that operating system, right? Like really hardening what they need to do, how they need to do it, and having that clarity. So that's what I tend to see.
That makes sense. I mean, that's essentially what we're looking at. While I want product velocity, which is continuously what we measure ourselves on, there's operational excellence that comes in. It's more, where do we need processes and how do we scale these processes? And that's really top of mind for us now that the team is larger.
Yeah, right. And then I think you always have to balance that with what's right for our team at this stage. So I think you can definitely over process as well. And I think every stage you kind of have to have an idea or rely on people that have seen those stages to go, what's important, what's not important. And then also judge it with what's best for us, because it might be a little different than other people have had it based on how you want to have it or what you think your culture demands. But yeah, I definitely seen it go either side. All right. Here's the final question for you. So here's the situation. It's the most important question I've ever asked. And so I'm glad you're sitting down. It's going to be really important. So here's the scenario. You are trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. Now you have food and water and everything that you need, shelter, all that's great. But the one thing that you don't have is entertainment. However, there's an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with endless batteries. And you get to choose one cassette tape of any genre, of any time frame, so it doesn't have to be in the 80s, but one album that you get to listen to the rest of your life, and that's the only album.
It's really
So
easy. Queen.
it's easy for you?
Freddie Mercury. Yeah.
Oh
Anything.
my gosh, that's a good one. What specific album?
Well, I don't care. Any of them will.
So
I
Queen. That's awesome. That's the first time someone answered that.
pick one song.
If you had to pick one song, you have one song.
City, if I had to pick one.
Well, that's a great one because there's like it feels like about 5 different songs in that song.
Forever.
All right, that's awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate having you on the show.
For having me. It was fun.